I was staring at lines of malicious code on my monitor when my phone lit up. As a cybersecurity analyst, my entire life revolves around detecting threats. I spend my days building firewalls, tracking down unauthorized breaches, and protecting millions of dollars in corporate assets from people trying to steal what does not belong to them. It is a high-stress job, one that requires me to be constantly paranoid, always looking for the hidden backdoor or the disguised phishing attempt. I am trained to expect the worst from anonymous hackers halfway across the globe. But nothing, no amount of training or professional paranoia, could have prepared me for the notification glaring from my own personal screen on a random Tuesday afternoon. The push notification from my banking app was brief, but it hit me like a physical punch to the stomach. Your savings account has been modified. Co-owner Tierney_lifestyle98 has been granted full access to your balance of $150,000. My heart stopped beating. My lungs forgot how to pull in air. The bright, sterile glow of my office suddenly felt suffocating, closing in on me like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. I blinked, rubbing my eyes hard, convinced I was hallucinating from staring at screens too long. But when I looked again, the notification was still there, burning into my retinas. Tierney. That was my sister. My spoiled, entitled, influencer sister who was currently drowning in debt and lived her life like financial consequences were a myth. I grabbed my phone, my fingers shaking so violently that I dropped it onto my desk. The loud clatter made me flinch, drawing a curious glance from a coworker across the glass partition. I snatched the device up again, ignoring him, and dialed my bank's emergency fraud line. The ringing felt like it dragged on for hours. Each dial tone was a hammer hitting an anvil inside my skull. When the representative finally answered, a woman who introduced herself as Brenda, her voice was infuriatingly calm and cheerful. "I am calling to report unauthorized access," I managed to say. I tried to keep the panic out of my throat, but my voice trembled. "Someone just added themselves to my high-yield savings account. I need it frozen immediately. This is a theft in progress." Brenda maintained her customer service tone. "I understand you are concerned, ma'am. Let us get you verified first." She asked for my security verification. I rattled off my social security number, my PIN, the answers to my security questions about my first pet, and the street I grew up on. I could hear her typing on her keyboard. The rhythmic clicking sounded like a countdown clock ticking away my future. My down payment for a house. My emergency fund. My freedom. All of it, sitting in an account that Tierney could now access with a single tap on her brand new phone. "Miss Sutton," Brenda finally said, her tone shifting slightly. "I am looking at the account history right now. The authorization was not done online. It was processed in person at our downtown branch roughly 2 hours ago." I froze. A chill ran down my spine, pooling at the base of my neck. "What are you talking about?" "I am sitting in my office building. I have been here since 8 in the morning. I have not been to a branch in over a year." "The authorization was provided by your parents," Brenda explained. Her voice took on a sympathetic patience, which only made me feel sicker. "They are listed on your profile as emergency contacts. They came in with a notarized medical power of attorney. They stated that you were involved in a severe car accident and are currently in a medically induced coma." The room spun. A cold, bitter bow rose in the back of my throat. I squeezed my eyes shut, gripping the edge of my desk until my knuckles turned stark white. My own parents. My mother and father. They faked a medical emergency. They stood in front of a bank teller, looked another human being straight in the eyes, lied to their faces, and declared their eldest daughter incapacitated. And why? Just so they could hand over every single penny I had worked my entire 20s to save to my golden child sister. "They brought in documentation," Brenda continued, filling the dead air on the line. "And they had a sworn statement. The notes from the branch manager say your mother was very emotional. She cried in the lobby. She told the manager that her other daughter needed the funds to manage your affairs and pay for your incoming medical bills. And then she added a personal note. She told the manager, 'My daughter would want her sister to have this. She needs the money more right now. She can always make more when she wakes up.'" I felt a white-hot rage burn through my veins. It incinerated the last remaining shreds of love, obligation, and respect I had for the people who raised me. How did it get to this point? How did my own flesh and blood decide that my life savings was just a piggy bank for someone else's lifestyle? I am not in a coma, I said, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous whisper that barely sounded like my own. I am sitting at my desk. I am perfectly healthy. My parents committed federal fraud. They lied. They forged a medical document. Remove her access immediately. I want her name off my account right now. I understand your frustration, Miss Sutton, Brenda said. She sounded genuinely alarmed now, the cheerful customer service facade totally shattered. But because the documents were filed in person and verified by the branch manager, I cannot just press a button and remove a co-owner without a formal fraud investigation. I can submit the claim right now to our specialized department. How long? I demanded, standing up from my chair and pacing the small confines of my cubicle. How long does the investigation take? Usually 24 to 48 hours, she replied apologetically. I can try to put a temporary hold on outgoing wires, but since she is now listed as a legal co-owner, she has the right to initiate transfers. I cannot stop her if she uses the online portal before the fraud department officially locks the account down. It is a system limitation. 48 hours. My sister could drain my entire account by tomorrow morning. She could transfer it all while I was sleeping. She could use it to pay off her massive credit card debts, buy designer bags, or fund her next fake vacation for her followers. By the time the bank realized I was not in a coma, the money would be gone, laundered through Tierney's endless black hole of expenses. I thanked Brenda curtly, hung up the phone, and stared at the dark wall of my cubicle. I was utterly alone. I had always been alone. My family had just proven that my safety, my future, and my life meant nothing to them compared to Tierney's comfort. If you want to know what ultimate family betrayal looks like, you are looking right at it. But I am a cybersecurity analyst. I do not just sit back and let hackers steal my data. I fight back. And the bank said it would take 48 hours to process my fraud claim. My sister could transfer everything in 12. I had to save myself, and what would happen next was going to change everything. Before I could even think about my next technical move, my mind pulled me backward, dragging me through a museum of painful memories I had spent years trying to lock away. The flashing notification on my phone was not an isolated incident. It was the grand finale of a lifetime of being the invisible child. I was the scapegoat, the workhorse, the reliable appliance in the corner of the room. I was the one whose achievements were brushed under the rug so they would not cast a shadow on Tierney's spectacular, constant failures. As I sat there trembling in my office chair, breathing in the recycled air conditioning, I remembered my college graduation. It was pouring rain that day, a miserable, freezing downpour. I stood on the muddy grass of the university quad in my cheap black robe, clutching my diploma in computer science. I had graduated top of my class with honors. I looked around the sea of cheering families, parents holding umbrellas and bouquets of flowers, taking pictures with their beaming children. I searched for my parents' faces in the crowd. I stood there for an hour, the rain soaking through my robe and ruining my shoes. They never showed up. When I finally retreated to an empty hallway and called them, my teeth chattering from the cold, my mother answered with a heavy sigh. "We cannot make it, Sutton," she had said, her voice filled with annoyance, as if my graduation was an unexpected inconvenience interrupting her day. Tierney was practicing on her new motorized scooter in the driveway, and she tipped over. She has a terrible scratch on her knee. She is really shaken up and crying hysterically. We need to stay here and comfort her. You understand, right? You are strong. You can celebrate by yourself. Get a nice dinner on the way home. I hung up the phone and walked 2 miles back to my off-campus apartment in the rain. I was 22 years old, and I learned that day that my academic triumph, for years of grueling late nights and sacrifices, was worth less than a minor scrape on my sister's knee. But it was not just the emotional neglect that shaped my life. It was the financial double standard that slowly suffocated me. I had to take out a $65,000 student loan to get through school. When I got my acceptance letter, my parents sat me down at the kitchen table and told me they simply could not afford to help. They said hard work builds character, and they were proud I was so self-sufficient. They said paying my own way would teach me the value of a dollar. So, I worked 3 jobs. I worked in the campus dining hall, coming back to my dorm every night smelling like stale grease and bleach. I worked overnight as a security monitor at the library, studying by the dim light of a desk lamp while my peers went to parties and networked. I ate cheap instant ramen so many times that just the smell of artificial chicken broth now makes my stomach turn. Yet, 3 months after I graduated, while I was drowning in debt and eating plain rice to make rent, my father dipped into his retirement fund. He pulled out $40,000 in cash to buy Tierney a bright red convertible. She needs to look the part, my father had justified at Thanksgiving dinner that year. He waved his fork at me across the table when I dared to question how they found $40,000 for a car but zero for my tuition. She is trying to be a lifestyle influencer, Sutton. She is going to castings and brand meetings in the city. People judge you by what you drive in that industry. You would not understand. You sit in a dark room typing on a keyboard all day. Tierney needs to project success to achieve it. I remembered sitting at that dinner table, staring down at my plate of turkey and mashed potatoes. I remembered the exact outfit I was wearing. It was a faded beige sweater I had bought at a thrift store for $5 because I could not justify spending money on new clothes when my student loan interest was piling up. Just then, Tierney had walked into the dining room, twirling the keys to her new car around her finger, wearing a designer silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She stopped behind my chair, looking down at me with that smug, pitiful expression she had perfected over the years. "Oh, honey," Tierney had said, reaching out to pick an imaginary piece of lint off my shoulder. "Are you still wearing that old thing? You know, if you spent a little less time being a computer nerd and a little more time taking care of your appearance, you might actually meet a nice guy who could buy you new clothes. You just look so tired all the time. It is kind of embarrassing for the family when guests come over." I did not say a word. I just swallowed my pride, packed up my leftovers in a plastic container, and drove my beat-up, 10-year-old sedan back to my tiny apartment. I let them treat me like dirt because I had convinced myself that if I just worked hard enough, one day I would be entirely free from them. And I did work hard. I clawed my way up the corporate ladder. I lived far below my means. I paid off every single cent of my $65,000 loan by the time I was 26. I started saving aggressively. I denied myself vacations to Europe. I denied myself luxuries. I built a massive safety net of $150,000 because I knew with absolute certainty that if I ever fell, no one in my family would be there to catch me. And now, they wanted to steal the very parachute I had spent 10 years knitting with my own bloody fingers. They did not just want to help Tierney. They wanted to sacrifice me to save her. It is a special kind of agony to realize that your parents view you not as a daughter, but as a financial resource to be harvested whenever their favorite child runs into trouble. Have you ever had to stand by and watch your blood, sweat, and tears be trampled on to roll out the red carpet for someone who despises you? If you are listening to this and your blood is boiling, hold on tight. Because the events that unfolded next pushed me over the edge, and the retribution I delivered is going to feel incredibly satisfying. But first, I had to understand exactly why they were suddenly desperate enough to commit a federal crime. The morning after the bank notification, I woke up with a pounding headache that felt like a nail being driven through my temples. I had barely slept, spending the entire night on my couch monitoring my account like a hawk, refreshing the banking app every 5 minutes to make sure the balance was still there. So far, Tierney had not moved anything. Maybe she was sleeping off a hangover. Maybe my parents told her to wait until the dust settled and the bank processed the paperwork fully. Whatever the reason, her hesitation was my only advantage. I dragged myself out of bed, threw on my work clothes, and headed down to the dim, concrete parking garage of my apartment building. I just wanted to get to the office, talk to a colleague I trusted, and figure out how to stop this nightmare legally. But the universe decided I had not suffered quite enough yet. As I approached my modest sedan, I noticed something terribly wrong. A deep, jagged white line was carved into the dark blue paint, running all the way from the front headlight, across both doors, and ending at the rear bumper. Someone had keyed my car. Hard. I stared at the damage, my heart sinking into my shoes. Tucked under the windshield wiper, flapping slightly in the draft of the garage, was a piece of crumpled notebook paper. I pulled it out. The handwriting was messy, written in thick black marker. "Next time, let your sister use the apartment, you selfish hater." I crumpled the paper in my fist, my nails digging into my palms. A few days ago, Tierney had demanded that I vacate my apartment for the weekend so she could use it as a backdrop to film some sponsored content. She said her own apartment was too messy and cluttered with PR boxes. I told her no. I told her I needed to work from home on a critical security patch and could not have her filming crew tramping through my living space. She threw a massive tantrum over the phone, then went on her social media live stream and cried to her thousands of followers about how her sister was an unsupportive, jealous monster who was actively trying to sabotage her career. One of her deranged teenage fans must have tracked down my address from an old photo she posted years ago. My sister had weaponized her audience against me over a minor apartment dispute. And now she had a direct pipeline to my life savings. I got into my damaged car, locked the doors, and leaned my head against the steering wheel. I pulled out my phone and opened social media. I needed to see what Tierney was up to. I needed to understand why she suddenly needed $150,000. She was always broke, always asking our parents for bailouts, but this was a different level of desperation. Faking a coma was not a casual move. I scrolled through my feed until I saw a video that had gone viral overnight. It was posted by Maura. Maura used to be Tierney's best friend and her unofficial talent manager. They had a massive, public falling out 3 months ago. I clicked play, the audio echoing in the quiet car. Maura was sitting in her bedroom, looking straight into the camera, holding a thick stack of printed papers. "I am done covering for Tierney," Maura said, her voice shaking with righteous anger. "Everyone thinks she is living this luxurious life, but it is all a lie. She is a massive fraud. She owes multiple local vendors thousands of dollars for event planning and catering. She took deposit money from small clothing brands to promote their products and never posted a single thing. But worse than that, she is currently $150,000 in debt. She has maxed out 6 credit cards. The brands are preparing a class action lawsuit against her for breach of contract and theft by deception. She is going down, and she is dragging her parents down with her because they co-signed her latest massive business loan." The video cut to black. I sat in my car, the silence deafening. It all made terrifying, twisted sense now. The brands were suing. My parents had co-signed her loans. If Tierney went down for fraud, my parents would lose everything. Their house, their retirement accounts, their pristine reputation in their little suburban neighborhood. They were cornered animals. They realized their golden child had built a castle on quicksand, and it was collapsing rapidly. So what did they do? Instead of letting her face the consequences of her actions, instead of selling their own assets to bail her out, they looked at me, the scapegoat. The quiet, responsible daughter who lived below her means, had a fat bank account, and had no one to defend her. They decided to throw me under the bus to cushion her fall. My phone buzzed in my hand, startling me out of my thoughts. It was a text message from my mother. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with tears of pure, unadulterated fury. "Good morning, Sutton. We have some wonderful family news to share. Your father and I would love for you to come over for a nice steak dinner tomorrow night. Tierney will be there too. Let us say around 7. Love you. A steak dinner. Wonderful family news." They were going to feed me a nice meal, smile in my face, pour me a glass of wine, and then tell me they were taking my money to save their precious golden child. They probably thought I would just cry, yell a little bit, and ultimately accept it, because that is what I had always done. I had always taken the hit to keep the peace. A cold, calm clarity suddenly washed over me. The tears dried up instantly. My hands stopped shaking. I replied to the text message. "Sounds great, Mom. I cannot wait to hear the good news. See you at 7. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and started the engine. The engine purred, the sound grounding me in reality. I was not the scared college student standing in the rain anymore. I was a professional cybersecurity analyst. I dismantle complex, malicious threats for a living. My family thought they had successfully hacked my life. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. The war had just started. And tomorrow night, I was going to burn their entire illusion to the ground. I drove straight to my office, parked my vandalized car in the secure underground lot, and marched into the building. The sleek, modern architecture of the tech firm usually felt somewhat sterile, but today, it felt like a heavily fortified castle. I needed an ally. I needed someone who understood the intricate architecture of secure systems, legal loopholes, and defensive strategies. I needed Declan. Declan is the senior tech lead on my team. He is in his late 50s, a former military intelligence officer with a neat salt and pepper beard and a demeanor so calm and collected it borders on intimidating. He has been my mentor since my first day on the job. He knew I came from a difficult background, though I rarely shared the specifics with anyone at work. Today, the specifics were spilling out whether I wanted them to or not. I walked into his glass-walled office, closed the heavy door behind me, and pulled down the privacy blinds. Declan looked up from his dual monitors, his eyebrows raising in surprise at my sudden intrusion. "Sutton," he said, his deep voice cautious. "You look like you are about to either faint or punch a hole through the wall. Sit down." I sat down in the chair across from him, and I told him everything. I told him about the medical power of attorney, the forged documents declaring me comatose, the $150,000 sitting vulnerable in the account, the viral video exposing Tierney's massive debts, and the upcoming ambush dinner my mother had planned. I spoke fast, the words tumbling out of my mouth in a frantic, desperate rush. "I cannot wait 48 hours for the bank fraud department to investigate," I concluded, my chest heaving as I tried to catch my breath. "She could move the money today. I need to move it first. But if I just wire it to another normal checking account under my name, my parents will claim I am stealing funds that they legally have rights to manage under that fake medical order. They will tie me up in civil court for months. I need to make the money disappear entirely." Declan leaned back in his large leather chair, steepling his fingers together. He did not offer empty platitudes. He did not tell me family is complicated or that I should try to talk it out with them. He looked at the situation exactly how I needed him to look at it, as a severe, critical security breach. "Sutton," he said slowly, choosing his words with precision. "In cybersecurity, when we detect a piece of malware inside a network, we do not just hit delete. If you just delete it, it might trigger a fail-safe. We isolate it. We put it in a sandbox environment where it cannot execute its programming, and we let it starve itself of resources. It is time to apply that exact principle to your family." "How?" I asked, leaning forward, hanging on his every word. "We are going to set up a ghost trust fund," Declan explained. He turned to one of his monitors and opened a secure, encrypted browser, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "It is a perfectly legal financial instrument, but it creates a titanium wall around your assets. You are going to open a new account today, but not under your individual name. We are going to establish a rapid revocable living trust. You will be the sole trustee and the sole beneficiary." He started pulling up complex legal templates and banking portals. "When you wire the money into a trust account, it ceases to be your personal property in the traditional sense," he continued, his eyes scanning the screen. "If your parents try to use that fraudulent medical power of attorney to claim the money from the new bank, they will hit a massive brick wall. A standard medical power of attorney does not grant them authority to breach or dissolve a legal trust. Only a specific court order can do that, and the moment they try to get a judge to issue a court order, their forgery of the medical document will be exposed to the federal legal system." A wave of profound relief washed over me. It was brilliant. It was a digital fortress that they could not socially engineer their way out of. But Declan did not stop there. He turned back to look me dead in the eye, his expression grave. "You also need to realize the extreme gravity of what your parents did today. Forging a medical power of attorney to gain access to financial accounts is wire fraud and identity theft. Because it involves electronic banking across state servers, it is a federal crime. If the sum is over $100,000, the FBI takes it very seriously. They crossed a line you cannot uncross. I swallowed hard, a lump forming in my throat. They are my parents, Declan. I just want my money safe so I can buy a house and move on with my life. I do not want to put them in federal prison. Declan sighed, a sad, knowing look in his eyes. I know you do not. You are a good person. But they were perfectly willing to destroy your entire life to save your sister's fake internet persona. You need to gather digital evidence, just in case they decide to escalate this and come after you. You need to record the dinner tomorrow night. Let them admit what they did on tape. In this state, it is a one-party consent state for recording conversations. As long as you are a participating party in the conversation, you can legally record it without telling them. Record them, I repeated, the reality of the situation fully sinking in. Yes, he said firmly. You need an insurance policy. Because people who are desperate enough to fake a coma will not just give up when they find an empty bank account. They will lash out. They will try to destroy your reputation or sue you. You need a weapon to protect yourself when they do. I nodded slowly. The fear that had been paralyzing me all morning started to evaporate entirely, replaced by a cold, calculated focus. I was not a victim anymore. I was a professional dealing with a hostile security threat. Declan helped me navigate the online legal forms to establish the trust. It took 3 hours of intense, focused work. We filed the paperwork electronically, paid the heavy expedited processing fees, and by early afternoon, I had the routing and account numbers for a brand new, highly secured trust account at an entirely different banking institution on the other side of the country. One my parents had no idea existed. You are a genius, Declan, I said, feeling a genuine smile touch my lips for the first time in days. I am just a guy who hates seeing good people get taken advantage of, he replied, handing me a printout of my new account details. Now go secure your perimeter. I left his office feeling like a soldier marching to the front lines. I had a plan. I had a shield. Now, all I had to do was execute the most satisfying financial maneuver of my entire life and watch my family walk right into the trap they had built for me. How far would you go to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to protect you? We were about to find out. The late afternoon sun was casting long, golden shadows across my apartment living room as I sat down on my couch with my laptop open. The silence in the room was heavy, thick with anticipation and adrenaline. I had successfully created the Ghost Trust Fund with Declan's help. The fortress was built. Now came the terrifying part. The extraction. I logged into my compromised bank account one last time. The balance sat there on the screen, mocking me in bold green numbers. $150,000. I clicked on the transfer tab. My hands were remarkably steady now. The panic and grief from yesterday had been entirely replaced by an icy, methodical resolve. I entered the routing number for the new trust account. I carefully typed in the long account number, verifying it 3 times against the printout Declan had given me. Then came the amount field. I stared at the cursor blinking in the empty box. I could take it all. I could leave a clean 0 balance. But 0 was too clean. 0 looked like a computer glitch or a bank error. I wanted them to know this was intentional. I wanted the final number to be a deliberate statement of defiance. I typed in the transfer amount, $149,998.96. I hit the review button. The screen loaded for an agonizing second, showing me the transaction summary. I was leaving exactly $1.04 in the old account. It was the absolute bare minimum required by this specific bank to keep an account active and prevent it from automatically closing. If it closed, it would send a final physical statement to my home address, which my parents might intercept. $1.04 was enough to keep the trap armed and active. I took a deep breath, hovering my mouse over the confirm button. This money represented every weekend I did not go out with friends in my 20s. Every vacation I skipped. Every night I stayed up until 3 in the morning analyzing code to earn a corporate bonus. It was my blood, sweat, and tears. And with one single click, I was taking it all back. I clicked confirm. A green checkmark appeared on the screen. Transfer initiated. Funds will be available in the destination account within 1 business day. I navigated back and refreshed the main account page. The giant green number was gone. In its place, a pathetic, tiny font read, "Available balance, $1.04. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for 10 agonizing years. A short, hysterical laugh bubbled up in my throat, echoing in the quiet apartment. It was done. The money was gone, vanished into a digital vault where my parents and Tierney could never, ever reach it. But I was not finished. Declan had told me to secure the perimeter. That meant setting up early warning systems and defensive traps. I navigated to the security settings of my now almost empty account. I changed the password, making it a 20-character alphanumeric string that even a corporate supercomputer would struggle to crack. Then I set up custom fraud alerts. If anyone tried to initiate a transaction, check the balance at an ATM, or link a new debit card to this account, I would get an instant text message and an encrypted email. I also checked a small, hidden box that would automatically flag any significant withdrawal attempts as suspicious activity directly to the bank's automated fraud matrix. My parents and Tierney were going to walk into a digital minefield. Next, I closed my laptop, grabbed my car keys, and drove to a massive local electronics store. I walked down the bright aisles, ignoring the massive televisions and flashy home gadgets, heading straight for the security and surveillance section. I found what I needed hanging on a small peg hook near the bottom shelf, a professional-grade digital audio recorder. It was roughly the size of a small USB flash drive. The box boasted 15 hours of continuous recording and a highly sensitive omnidirectional microphone designed to pick up whispers across a room. I purchased it with physical cash, avoiding leaving any paper trail on my credit cards just in case my parents tried to track my movements. When I got back to my apartment, I spent an hour testing the device. I pinned it to the inside lining of my oversized, everyday leather tote bag. I walked around the living room, speaking in different volumes. I murmured to myself, I shouted, I pretended to eat chips to test the background noise cancellation. I plugged it into my computer and listened to the playback. The audio was crystal clear. It picked up every sigh, every rustle of fabric, every single word. It was perfect. The night passed agonizingly slowly. I hardly slept, my mind racing with endless scenarios of how the steak dinner would play out. Would they demand the money outright before the appetizers? Would they try to manipulate me with fake tears and stories of family loyalty? Would Tierney play the helpless victim? I had to be ready for every psychological tactic they possessed. The next evening, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, getting dressed for the dinner. I chose my outfit very carefully. I reached into the back of my closet and pulled out the exact same faded, cheap thrift store sweater I had worn on that Thanksgiving years ago when Tierney had mocked my appearance. I wanted to look exactly like the pathetic, pushover target they thought I was. I wanted to feed their arrogance so they would let their guard down. I slung the leather tote bag over my shoulder, reaching inside to press the small tactile record button. A tiny red light blinked once against my fingertip, confirming it was active and recording. I drove to my parents' house in my scratch sedan. The suburban streets looked identical to how they always had, lined with manicured green lawns and large, expensive houses bought on heavy credit. I parked in the wide driveway, pulling up right behind Tierney's bright red convertible. I sat in the car for a moment, the engine idling quietly. My heart was thumping against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. The point of no return. I was about to walk into a lion's den, but I was the one holding the loaded gun. I took one final, steadying breath, turned off the engine, and stepped out into the cool evening air. I walked up the brick pathway, pasted a naive, hopeful smile on my face, and pressed the doorbell. The door swung open, and the rich scent of expensive grilled steak hit my face. My mother stood there, beaming with a smile so fake it looked like a plastic mask glued to her skin. Let the games begin. If you are loving this story and want to see me tear their plans apart, drop a comment below saying, I'm win. That is the secret code for everyone who has made it this far, and I will be hearting and replying to every single one of those comments. I stepped over the threshold, and the heavy scent of expensive grilled steak and roasted garlic hit my face. The house looked exactly as it always had, a picture-perfect suburban illusion. The living room was immaculate, with plush white rugs and framed family photos that conveniently featured Tierney front and center, while I was usually relegated to the blurry background. My mother ushered me inside, her hands fluttering nervously. "Oh, Sutton, we are so glad you could make it," she chirped, taking my coat. Her voice was an octave higher than usual. It was the voice she used when she was trying to sell something at a charity auction. I walked into the dining room. My father was uncorking a bottle of dark red wine, and Tierney was already seated at the table. She was scrolling through her phone, looking intensely bored. When she looked up, the first thing I noticed was the massive, glittering gold Rolex wrapped around her wrist. It caught the light from the chandelier, practically blinding me. She was supposedly $150,000 in debt, facing a class action lawsuit, and she was wearing a watch that cost more than my first car. "Hey, sis," Tierney said, not bothering to stand up. "Long time no see. Love the vintage look. Did you get that sweater from a donation bin?" I smiled, pulling out my chair and sitting down. "No, I got it at a thrift store. It is very comfortable." "How is the influencer business going, Tierney? I heard things are getting pretty intense." A brief shadow of panic crossed her heavily contoured face, but she masked it instantly with a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, you know how it is. Haters are always trying to bring successful people down. It is exhausting being in the public eye. My skin has been so dry lately just from the stress, and the air conditioning in that fancy restaurant last week totally ruined my moisture barrier." I stared at her, genuinely fascinated by her delusion. She was standing on the deck of a sinking ship, complaining about the sea breeze. My mother hurried in with plates of perfectly seared steak, asparagus, and mashed potatoes. We all began to eat. The first 20 minutes were agonizing. We talked about the weather. We talked about the neighbor's new landscaping. We talked about everything except the massive, federal crime elephant sitting in the middle of the room. I chewed my steak slowly, feeling the tiny square outline of the audio recorder pressing against my ribs through the fabric of my tote bag, which I had placed strategically on the empty chair beside me. Finally, as my mother cleared the dinner plates and brought out a tray of coffee and lemon tart, the atmosphere shifted. The fake smiles tightened. My father cleared his throat, adjusting his collar as if it had suddenly grown too tight. "Sutton," he began, resting his forearms on the polished mahogany table. "Your mother and I wanted to talk to you about something important as a family. We are going through a bit of a rough patch, and we need everyone to pitch in and be supportive." I took a slow sip of my water, buying time. "Oh? What kind of rough patch?" "It is about Tierney," my mother chimed in, leaning forward with a deeply rehearsed look of maternal concern. "She has hit a few unfair roadblocks in her career. Some vendors have been very unprofessional, and she needs a temporary financial bridge to get her through this quarter. We know you have been very diligent with your savings, honey. And we are so proud of you for that." Tierney looked at her fingernails, feigning humility. "It is just a temporary cash flow issue, Sutton. I have massive brand deals lined up for next year. I just need to clear up some immediate overhead." My father reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a folded paper napkin. He slid it across the table toward me. "Your mother and I did some math. We know you have a substantial amount in your high-yield account. We went ahead and took the initiative to set up a support system. Tierney is going to borrow the funds, and she is committed to a strict repayment plan." I looked down at the napkin. Written in my father's neat handwriting was a schedule. It said, "Repayment to Sutton. $50 per month." I stared at the ink. I did the math in my head instantly. To pay back $150,000 at $50 a month, without a single cent of interest, it would take her 250 years. 2.5 centuries. $50 a month, I repeated, my voice devoid of any inflection. "It is what she can afford right now while she rebuilds," my mother said quickly, sounding defensive. "Family helps family, Sutton. You sit in front of a computer all day. You do not have overhead or image maintenance costs. You do not really need that money right now anyway. I let out a slow, breathy chuckle. It was not a happy sound. It was the sound of a rubber band snapping after being stretched too far. I looked up, locking eyes with my father, then my mother, and finally, my sister. If you are watching this, and you can feel your blood pressure rising, just wait. The trap is set, and I am about to pull the lever. I promise you, what happens next is worth every second of this painful dinner. I placed the napkin gently on the table and folded my hands. The audio recorder in my bag was capturing every single breath, every single word. I needed them to admit it plainly. So, let me get this straight, I said, keeping my tone inquisitive, almost soft. You want to borrow the money. But how exactly were you planning on getting it? My account is highly secure. My parents exchanged a nervous, fleeting glance. My father cleared his throat again. Well, we actually went to your bank branch yesterday. We wanted to handle the administrative side of things so you would not have to worry about the paperwork. We added Tierney as a co-owner to the account. I leaned forward. You added her without my signature? How did the bank allow that? My mother reached over and patted my hand, her palm clammy. We had to use an emergency protocol, sweetie. The bank manager was very understanding. We used a medical power of attorney. We told them you had a bad accident and were incapacitated. It was just a little white lie to cut through the corporate red tape. You know how difficult banks can be. I felt a surge of cold triumph wash over me. The recording had it. The explicit admission of forging a medical document and lying to a financial institution. A little white lie, I repeated. You faked a medical coma to bypass my security and give Tierney access to $150,000. Do not be so dramatic, Sutton, Tierney scoffed, rolling her eyes. It is family money. Mom and Dad co-signed my loans, so technically they are at risk too. You have just been hoarding it doing nothing. I actually need it to survive. I nodded slowly, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked the screen, opened my secure banking application, and navigated to the main dashboard. The screen glowed brightly in the dim dining room. Here is the interesting thing about that account, I said, my voice dropping its soft facade, turning sharp and precise like a scalpel. When I got the security alert that a new owner had been added, I realized there was a severe security breach. So, I took immediate action. I slid the phone across the smooth mahogany table. It stopped right in front of Tierney's plate. Tierney looked down at the screen. Her brow furrowed in confusion. She blinked, leaning closer. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. What is it? My mother asked, leaning over Tierney's shoulder. My mother's face went entirely slack. All the color drained from her cheeks, leaving her looking like a wax figure. My father stood up, pulling his reading glasses from his shirt pocket and stared at the glowing numbers. $1.04? My father read aloud, his voice cracking. What does this mean? Where is the rest of it? It means, I said, leaning back in my chair and crossing my arms, that you went through a lot of trouble to commit federal wire fraud for nothing. The moment you left that bank branch yesterday, I transferred every single penny into a secure, blind trust at a different institution. An institution that you do not know, using legal protections that a fake medical power of attorney cannot break. The silence that followed was heavy, thick, and incredibly loud. You hid the money? Tierney whispered, her eyes wide with genuine panic. But I need that money. I have a transfer scheduled for tomorrow morning to pay my vendors. You mean to pay your lawsuit settlements, I corrected her. My father slammed his hands down on the table, making the fine china rattle. Sutton, reverse that transfer right now. Do you have any idea what you are doing? Your sister is on the verge of ruin. We could lose this house. I am fully aware of what is happening, Dad. I saw Maura's video. I know she is drowning in debt. And I know you co-signed it. But your financial ruin is not my responsibility. My savings account is not your bailout fund. You selfish little brat. My mother shrieked, her composed suburban mom persona shattering into a million pieces. We are your family. We gave you life. You owe us. I owe you nothing, I shot back, my voice rising to match hers. I paid for my own college. I paid for my own car. I bought my own clothes. The only thing you ever gave me was a front row seat to watch you spoil her while I ate instant noodles. You tried to steal everything I have worked for to fix her mistakes. Tierney grabbed the phone and shoved it back toward me, her face flushed red with fury. Put it back, Sutton. Put the money back right now, or I swear to God I will ruin your life. I will tell everyone what a horrible, toxic sister you are. I picked up my phone and slipped it calmly back into my pocket. Oh, Tierney. You do not have the power to ruin my life anymore. In fact, I think you have bigger problems to worry about right now. I looked at my watch. The timing was going to be impeccable. Just as my mother opened her mouth to hurl another insult at me, a sharp, buzzing sound cut through the tension. It was Tierney's phone, vibrating violently against the wood table. A second later, my father's phone, resting near his wine glass, began to buzz as well. My father snatched up his device, his face still red with anger. Hello? He barked into the receiver. Yes, this is Harlan. What? No, I did not authorize that. Wait, why is my card declined? Tierney was staring at her own screen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. My credit cards, she gasped. All three of them just sent me push notifications. They are locked. The accounts are frozen. My father hung up his phone, looking terrified. American Express just flagged my account for suspected identity theft. They froze my credit lines. Sutton, what did you do? I smiled, a cold, hard smile that did not reach my eyes. When I transferred my money to the trust yesterday, I did not just secure my funds. I called the main fraud department. I reported a massive, verified security breach on my profile. I submitted proof that someone was using forged medical documents to access accounts within their banking ecosystem. I paused, watching the realization wash over them. Because you two and Tierney all use the exact same primary banking institution that I do, the system's automated matrix triggered a lockdown. When a major fraud alert hits a family profile, especially one involving forged federal documents, their algorithm freezes all linked accounts to prevent further money laundering. Your credit cards, your checking accounts, your home equity line of credit. Everything is frozen while they investigate. You reported us? My mother whispered, clutching her chest as if she were having a heart attack. You reported your own parents for fraud? You committed fraud, Mom. I just let the bank's security software do its job. Tierney stood up, knocking her chair backward. It crashed onto the hardwood floor. You are a monster. She screamed, pointing a manicured finger at me. I needed that money for a deposit tomorrow. A deposit for the vendors? I asked, raising an eyebrow. I reached into my tote bag, right next to the active recorder, and pulled out a folded piece of printer paper. I tossed it onto the table. It landed over the $50 a month napkin. Or a deposit for a Porsche? I asked. Tierney looked at the paper, and the remaining color drained from her face. It was a screenshot Declan had helped me pull from a hidden digital footprint. It showed an email confirmation from a luxury car dealership in the city. A non-refundable deposit of $30,000 was scheduled to be wired tomorrow morning for a brand new, custom interior Porsche Macan. She was not going to pay her debts, I said, looking at my parents, who were staring at the paper in horror. She was going to buy a luxury SUV so she could post pictures on Instagram and pretend she was not bankrupt. She was going to take my house down payment to buy a car, while you two lose your actual house. Tierney started to cry, real, ugly tears ruining her expensive makeup. I had to, she sobbed, looking at our parents. If the brands think I am broke, they will drop my remaining contracts. I have to project wealth. I have to look successful. My father looked from the paper to Tierney and then to me. His hands were shaking. Sutton, he said, his voice trembling with a mix of rage and fear. You need to call the bank right now. You need to tell them it was a misunderstanding. Tell them you gave us permission. If you do not fix this right now, I am calling the police. I will have you arrested for filing a false report. I slowly stood up, slinging my tote bag over my shoulder. I looked down at the three of them. They looked small. They looked pathetic. Call the police, Dad, I said calmly. Please call them. Because I would love to show the officers the fake medical power of attorney you submitted. And, just so you know, the bank's fraud investigator is already reviewing the security footage of you lying to the branch manager. They told me they escalate cases over $100,000 directly to federal authorities. You do not need to call the cops. They are probably going to call you first thing tomorrow morning. I turned around and walked out of the dining room. I walked down the hallway, opened the heavy front door, and stepped out into the cool night air. I did not look back. I got into my scratched, dented sedan, started the engine, and drove away from that house for the very last time. The next morning, I was sitting in Declan's office with a large cup of black coffee, feeling an incredible sense of clarity. The exhaustion was there, deep in my bones, but it was overshadowed by the profound relief of having finally cut the cord. We were reviewing the audio file from the dinner. It was pristine. Every threat, every admission of guilt, every hysterical scream was captured perfectly. Just before noon, my phone rang. The caller ID showed an unknown corporate number. I answered it, putting it on speaker so Declan could hear. Sutton, this is Sloan. I am a senior fraud investigator with the bank's Federal Compliance Division. Hello, Sloan. I am calling to update you on your case, she said, her voice sharp and professional. We have reviewed the documentation submitted by your parents, Harlan and Corinne. We also pulled the lobby security footage and interviewed the branch manager. The medical power of attorney they utilized is a confirmed forgery. The notary seal on it belongs to an individual who passed away 3 years ago. Declan raised his eyebrows at me. They really did not think this through. Because the attempted unauthorized transfer involved a sum exceeding $100,000 and utilized interstate banking servers, this constitutes felony wire fraud, Sloan continued. Our legal department is mandated by federal banking regulations to refer this case to the authorities. I have already contacted Harlan this morning to inform him that his accounts will remain frozen pending a full investigation and that he should retain legal counsel. Thank you, Sloan, I said. I appreciate your diligence. I hung up the phone. Declan leaned back in his chair. Well, he said quietly, the hammer has officially dropped. But my family was not going down without throwing a tantrum. About an hour later, my phone started buzzing continuously with notifications from Facebook. I rarely checked the platform, but the sheer volume of alerts told me exactly what was happening. The flying monkeys had been released. I opened the app. Aunt Calloway, my mother's sister and the undisputed gossip queen of our extended family, had posted a massive, dramatic status update. She tagged me, my parents, Tierney, and about 40 other relatives. The post read, I am absolutely heartbroken and disgusted today. To think that blood could be so cruel. Harlan and Corinne are facing terrible financial hardships, and instead of helping the parents who gave her life, Sutton has chosen to be a vindictive, greedy monster. She is actively trying to send her own parents to jail over a simple misunderstanding about a family loan. Please pray for our family during this dark time, and pray that Sutton finds a heart. Below the post, the comments were already rolling in from cousins and distant uncles. I cannot believe Sutton would do that. Disgraceful. Money really changes people. I stared at the screen. 10 years ago, this kind of public shaming would have broken me. I would have called Aunt Calloway, crying, begging her to take it down, trying to explain myself. But today I had receipts. I uploaded the audio file from the dinner to a secure cloud drive. Then I copied the link to Maura's viral video exposing Tierney's massive fraud and the impending lawsuits. I clicked the comment box under Aunt Calloway's post and typed a simple response. Aunt Calloway, I am sorry you were lied to. It was not a misunderstanding. They forged a medical document claiming I was in a coma to steal my life savings to buy Tierney a Porsche. Here is the audio recording of them admitting to the felony at dinner last night. And here is the video explaining why Tierney is actually bankrupt. Please feel free to pay off her $150,000 debt yourself if family loyalty is so important to you. I hit enter. I attached the links. I sat back and watched the screen. For 5 minutes, there was dead silence. The flow of sympathetic comments stopped abruptly. Then, the view count on the audio file link started climbing. 5 views. 10 views. 30 views. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a private message from Aunt Calloway. Sutton. I had no idea. Your mother told me you were just being difficult about sharing your savings. My God. I am so sorry. 3 minutes after that, the entire Facebook post was deleted. Gone. Wiped from the internet. The flying monkeys did not just retreat, they turned their weapons around. Within an hour, I heard from a sympathetic cousin that the family group chats were exploding. Everyone was turning their backs on Corinne and Harlan. The social standing my mother had spent decades cultivating was reduced to ashes in a matter of minutes. The collapse of their empire was swift and brutal. I did not have to lift another finger. The system they tried to manipulate simply crushed them under its own weight. Without the massive infusion of cash from my stolen savings, Tierney's fragile house of cards blew away in the wind. The deposit for her custom Porsche failed to clear. The vendor she owed money to filed a public lawsuit for breach of contract. Within a week, the luxury brands that sponsored her caught wind of the fraud allegations. They dropped her instantly, issuing public statements distancing themselves from her brand. Her Instagram account, once a shrine to her fake wealth, went silent, flooded with angry comments from people she had scammed. She was officially bankrupt, facing mountains of legal fees she could not pay. But the real devastation hit my parents. Because they had co-signed Tierney's massive business loans, the creditors came after them. And because their main bank accounts were frozen due to the federal fraud investigation initiated by Sloan, they had no liquidity. They could not pay their mortgage. They could not pay their credit cards. A month after the fateful dinner, I received a certified letter in the mail from their defense attorney. The federal prosecutor was offering them a plea deal. If they paid massive restitution, cooperated fully, and accepted a felony record, they might avoid serving actual prison time for the wire fraud. But they needed cash to pay the lawyers and settle the immediate debts. They had to sell the house. The beautiful, sprawling suburban home with the manicured lawn and the huge kitchen where they had ambushed me. They were forced to sell it well below market value just to liquidate it quickly. They walked away with $90,000 in equity, every single cent of which went directly to lawyers and debt collectors. They had to move into a cramped, 2-bedroom apartment in a rundown neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Tierney, with no money, no sponsors, and no car, had to move in with them. They were finally trapped in the very reality they had spent their entire lives trying to avoid. I sat on my couch one evening, looking out the window at the city lights. I waited for the guilt to hit me. I waited for the nagging voice in the back of my head to tell me that I had gone too far, that I should have protected them. But the guilt never came. Instead, I felt an overwhelming, profound sense of peace. My chest felt light. The invisible weight I had carried around since childhood, the constant pressure to be the responsible fallback plan for reckless people, was entirely gone. My ghost trust fund was intact, earning interest safely out of their reach. My career was thriving. For the first time in my 29 years of life, my future belonged entirely to me. 2 months passed in glorious silence. I blocked their numbers, blocked their emails, and instructed the security desk at my office building to never let them up. I was moving on. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, I walked into my favorite local coffee shop near my office to grab a latte. I turned away from the counter, drink in hand, and froze. Sitting in a booth in the back corner was Tierney. She looked vastly different. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a plain gray hoodie and jeans. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and she wore no makeup. The giant Rolex was noticeably absent from her wrist. When she saw me, she stood up quickly, her eyes wide and pleading. "Sutton, please," she said, her voice shaking. "Just 5 minutes. Please." I hesitated. My initial instinct was to turn around and walk out the door. But a small, morbidly curious part of me wanted to see how the golden child was handling the real world. I walked over and slid into the booth opposite her. 5 minutes, I said, placing my coffee on the table. Tierney started crying immediately. It was the soft, pathetic crying she used to do when we were kids and she wanted our parents to buy her a toy. "Sutton, I am so sorry," she sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "I have lost everything. Everything is gone. Mom and Dad are miserable in that horrible apartment. They fight every single day. I am working as a receptionist at a dental office just to pay for groceries." I took a sip of my coffee. That sounds like a very normal, responsible job. Welcome to adulthood. "I know I was awful to you," she continued, wiping her eyes. "I let the internet fame get to my head. I thought I was untouchable. And I was so jealous of you, Sutton. You were always so smart and capable, and I was just faking it. I was so scared of failing that I let Mom and Dad do that horrible thing to you. Please, I just want my sister back. I want us to be a family again. Can you ever forgive me?" She reached across the table, her hand trembling, offering it to me. For a split second, a tiny fraction of a second, I felt a familiar tug of pity. She looked genuinely broken. But then my eyes, trained to look for anomalies and hidden threats, caught something. Underneath the collar of her gray hoodie, sitting right near her collarbone, a tiny, pinpoint red light was blinking. It was faint, barely visible through the fabric, but I knew exactly what it was. It was the recording indicator light of a lavalier microphone. The pity evaporated instantly, replaced by a cold, hard disgust. She was not here to apologize. She was here to create content. She was wearing a wire, trying to bait me into saying something angry or unforgiving so she could edit the audio. She wanted to launch a comeback tour on social media as the tragic victim of a cruel, wealthy sister who abandoned her family in their time of need. I looked down at her outstretched, trembling hand. Then I looked up at her tear-stained face. "You know, Tierney," I said, keeping my voice incredibly calm and flat. "I actually bought a similar recording device a few months ago. They are very sensitive." Tierney's eyes widened. Her hand shot back, flying to her collar. Without breaking eye contact, I picked up the large glass of ice water the waitress had left on the table. I leaned forward and smoothly, deliberately poured the entire glass directly onto the collar of her hoodie, right where the red light was blinking. Tierney gasped, jumping back as the freezing water soaked through her shirt. "Hey, what are you doing?" I set the empty glass down. "I am putting out a fire," I said simply. I stood up, pulled a $5 bill from my pocket, and tossed it onto the table to cover the coffee. "Have a great life at the dental office, Tierney. Do not ever contact me again." I turned around and walked out of the coffee shop, stepping into the rain. I felt a smile spread across my face. It was the best $5 I had ever spent. 6 months have passed since that day in the coffee shop. I am recording this from the living room of my brand new house. It is a beautiful, modest 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood with a big backyard. I bought it last month, putting down a massive down payment using the money from my ghost trust fund. The money that I earned, that I saved, and that I protected. I never spoke to my parents or my sister again. From what I hear through the grapevine, they are still living in that cramped apartment. My parents took the plea deal, paid a massive fine that wiped out the rest of their savings, and are currently serving 3 years of federal probation. Tierney is banned from most social media platforms due to the fraud lawsuits, and she is still working as a receptionist, slowly paying off her insurmountable debts. Sometimes, people ask me if I regret letting it go this far. They ask if I miss having a family for the holidays. But here is the truth, the philosophy I had to learn the hard way. Blood does not give anyone the right to be a parasite in your life. Sharing DNA does not mean you have to share your bank account, your peace of mind, or your future. For the first time in my life, my bank account is full, my career is skyrocketing, and I am surrounded by friends who actually respect my boundaries. But the most valuable thing I own now is not the money or the house. It is the absolute peace in my soul. I stopped setting myself on fire to keep them warm, and it turns out I really enjoy the cold. So, I leave you all with a question. If you were in my shoes, standing at that table with the bank investigator calling, would you have signed a leniency paper to keep your parents off probation? Or would you have let the federal system crush them for forging medical documents to steal your life savings? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. I will be reading through them. Thank you so much for listening to my story. If you found yourself cheering for this financial revenge, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another crazy Reddit drama story. Remember, always protect your peace and always check your bank notifications. See you in the next one.